Alright, for the Cap 19, y'all already know the drill. Main takeaways from the 19th week of the Warriors NBA season, so let's get it. There's all this talk about Jimmy Butler being another Draymond out there on the defensive side of the floor. Steve Kerr has compared Jimmy Butler to Iggy in the past, and clearly they view him as a valuable all-around team defender. Jimmy and Draymond as a frontcourt defensive duo is great for many reasons. Let's start with Jimmy. Like I said in the past, he's not no put him on the best player or an elite POA type of defender, but he's very good at dissecting the opposing team's offense. He understands where he needs to be in order to help on time. He's a great help side defender where he can rotate from the backside and defend the rim. If somebody dies on a screen and he has to switch out onto a guard or a post player and contain the ball, he can do that. But what he's even better at is defending passing lanes. He can sniff out so many passes because of his IQ and experience where he knows the patterns of where the next pass will be. Like for an example, if somebody beats somebody on our team off the dribble, Draymond is likely going to rotate and trap the box. And what Jimmy is going to do is sink down and help the helper, but that means there's a 2-on-1 advantage somewhere on the weak side. Jimmy can sink down and prevent an easy dump off, and he can cover ground to steal a corner skip pass. That takes a ton of athleticism but also a ton of IQ. Or sometimes Jimmy will purposely not even guard the passing lane. He'll leave it open to bait the offensive player to pass it, but what he's doing is that he's camping on the pass. So as soon as the pass comes, he's sprinting into the lane and getting a hand on it. He just has a nose for making plays defensively. He's led at the top of the league in steals for years. This is what he's done for a long time. He's a guy that blows plays up. He's not like Moody where he's disrupting things at the POA. He's doing it while being a help defender. Another thing that he does is blindside steals, meaning he'll come at an angle where the defense can't see him. Now in hindsight, this seems like it's a gamble, but it's really not because it's a calculated decision. A bad gamble is when you try to go for a steal where the passer and the receiver can see you. But in this case, the big usually can't see Jimmy coming from the blind side, and he times his opportunity well. The only issue with this is that if you do this, you only got one shot to make a play. If you go for it and you miss the steal, somebody is going to be wide open. Draymond has been great defensively with Jimmy as his job is much easier because he knows that Jimmy is always there to provide any secondary help if needed. He's been great as a screen defender playing the 5. His strong side digs have been accurate and well timed. His closeouts for the most part have been good, but however, when Jimmy didn't play in that Philly game, Draymond had a horrid defensive game. He was letting guys back cut him, he was late on closeouts, and he was just getting pushed around in the paint. It just seems like when there isn't another defensive minded player on the court with Draymond, that the defense just goes to shit because Draymond makes mistakes as a defensive player as well. Matter of fact, he makes a lot of risky decisions, but that also comes with being a great defender. But because he's the leader and the anchor defensively, there's no one else on the team to usually check him. But with Jimmy on the squad now, he can kind of keep Draymond in the right place defensively, and he can also clean up Draymond's mistakes. That was something that we never had in the last few years since Iggy retired. This is that importance where people are talking about having a veteran on your team. But the last thing that I will say about Draymond and Jimmy is that there's a good chance this duo won't be viable as a frontcourt against teams that have two big lineups. Teams like Memphis or Denver are those teams, but in particular, Orlando's frontcourt gave Jimmy and Draymond fits. Wagner, Banchero, Isaac, and Carter Jr. were throwing Jimmy and Draymond around in the paint. They were scoring with ease. They shot like 80% from the field in the first quarter, and that's where Steve Kerr had to slot Draymond at the 4 and Jimmy at the 3. Come playoff time against certain teams, Draymond and Jimmy will not be able to play the 4 or the 5. I've recently spoken about Pods and his impact as of recently since the Jimmy Butler trade, but something that has caught my eye even more is his improved POA defense. Pods has never been a guy where we feel confident putting on the other team's best player, and we still aren't. However, Pods has been defending very well at the point of attack. Firstly, in screening actions, he's been doing a good job getting around screens. He's been staying attached and getting skinny through the ball screens to stay on the offensive player's hips. But something else he's doing is getting behind the offensive player when they come off an off-ball screen. The reason why he's doing this is because he wants to avoid contact with the screen entirely so then he can fully chase. You'll see many elite defenders do this all the time where they'll accept being on the offensive player's backside and trail them downhill. And from there, Pods has been doing a good job timing the back tap steals, something that is risky, but he's been very successful at it thus far. He's also contesting in the rear view and blocking shots from behind where he's timing the release. Secondly, without ball screens, he's ball pressuring guys 94 feet. He's sitting down in a defensive stance and cutting guys off with his chest. And he's doing it without fouling by sliding his feet and showing his hands every single time. He's showing that he's not only displaying great defense, but also disciplined defense, something that is not taught enough. And here's the thing with Pods, he's not the quickest, the strongest, or the biggest, or even remotely athletic, but what he does have is heart and effort. And for that, I'm getting big Dellavedova vibes, where he doesn't stand out as a defender, but he's trying his absolute hardest out there. I remember him guarding Steph in the finals. I remember this so vividly, where I was like, he's not a great defender to where he's bothering Steph physically by disrupting his handle or his shot, but he is affecting Steph mentally to where he's just being a pest. Same thing goes for a guy like TJ McConnell, where he's not a great defender because of his size, but he's a great defender for his size. And I'm seeing the same thing happen for Pods. He was battling against LaMelo Ball in the Hornets game, where he was just active from start to finish. He made everything tough for LaMelo, and LaMelo was cold in the first half because of that. He was competing against Tyrese Maxey, and he was doing a good job. It's just his issue is that he's just too thin. Quinten Post has been making a ton of noise ever since he's gotten minutes, and he's playing so well that he's probably going to end up at the top of the list in this year's rookie class, as well as one of the best shooting bigs in the league. Everyone wants him to start and close games, and I would love for that to happen as well, as I love QP and what he's been doing. Everybody talks about the shooting ability, but what you gotta realize is that he's got great shot prep, where he's always ready to load his hips, catch the ball, and shoot it. He's very good at relocating at the perimeter as a shooting big. You'll see this all the time. Somebody drives, and then he'll either shake, drift, and he's like sliding his feet while being in position to catch the ball. Something that's very underrated when it comes to being a shooter. But with that being said, he's not starter or closer caliber, and here's why. First things first, we already know Post has defensive issues, but it's at a level where it's risky to give him a bigger leash. His rim protection as a 7-footer is average. In the Philly game, guys were getting downhill and finishing over him way too easily. We can't afford for him to have the rim protection slightly better than a guy like Jokic, considering he's not Jokic. His screen defense is one-dimensional for the most part, and it's a deep drop. But the issue with that is that our POA defenders aren't good enough at chasing for us to allow him to play a deep drop at a viable rate. Against some of the best players in the world, they're going to easily burn you for that. I actually think Post is pretty good at defending at the level or hedging and then dropping back into the paint. That's an option that I would consider exploring more if I was Steve Kerr. Another thing with him is switching. Now, he's been pretty good at switching out to guards and containing the ball and doing a good job not fouling, but he's also had lapses where he's been pretty bad as well. So it's been an up and down dynamic for him in that sense. I just can't imagine him switching out onto some of the best players in the league in a playoff environment. I just don't think that's a winning recipe. But the main thing that I'm noticing is defensive rebounding. He got whipped on the glass against Andre Drummond. He got whipped in the Orlando and the New York game as a defensive rebounder, where he's just not elevating high enough to get these boards. Now, part of it also has to do with him being a little soft underneath the basket, where he's letting guys get up into him first and he's losing the position. But if he's gonna close and start games, especially in the playoffs, it's an absolute non-negotiable that he can't be a bad rebounder. He's got to take some pointers from Loon and make an effort to get a hand on these boards early, because there's no reason why you're 7 feet and you can't grab a board against a guy that's 3 or 4 inches shorter than you. Offensively, he's been great. He's a real floor spacer, a pick and popper. He's got a weak post game, but I think that's something that we can work with. He's an overall much better play finisher than a guy like TJD, and he has outstanding basketball IQ. You can see it whenever he plays.